Without further ado, I will pass it off to Dr. Cortwright.
Well, thanks very much, Mari. Thanks for hosting this session tonight. Thanks for all the work you do for nature, education, and community, and for that matter, all the people at Shirley Hines and all they do for nature, education, and community. And thanks for all you do out there in the audience. Many of you do lots of work for nature, or most importantly, just go and visit nature preserves. That's the single most important thing any of us can do, is to go out and visit nature. Tonight's presentation is titled "The Same Road Taken Twice or Thrice or More, Ecological Joys in Revisiting Nature Preserves." I got the idea for this presentation while attending the memorial services of Gloria and Lauren Daly last fall. They lived long, healthy, productive lives and passed away close together. And their son Bob and daughter Debbie, each during comments at the services, made note of how their motto during family vacations was never take the same road twice. And on those vacations, they would be going out to visit lots of Western national parks and historic sites and other things. And so when you're covering that ground, I thought right there at the service, then you need to never take the same road twice. And if you're going to Egypt, like they did 15 years ago to ride camels, probably not take the same road twice for that. But in our local area, in the Western Great Lakes area, I thought maybe you do want to take the same road twice or thrice or more and revisit nature preserves. So I thought that would be a good topic for a presentation, and that's what we're doing tonight. Now, why should we go to nature preserves? Okay, now that's not advancing. Oh, there we go. Reasons to venture into nature. Lots of reasons are given here, and you can see the people in these various scenes all doing these things, getting fresh air, relaxing, going with family and friends, and so on. So there's all these are good reasons for going into nature, but I'm going to focus tonight on ecological insights that you get from repeated visits to the same nature preserve. And now ecology is a scientific field of study. It's the scientific study of nature, basically, just like microbiology is the scientific study of microbes, oncology is the scientific study of cancer, and so on. Ecology is a very broad field, so the kinds of insights that we can get are many and varied. Some people might go into nature many times. They're expert botanists, and we have a lot of those in northern Indiana, Michigan, and Illinois. And they want to find rare plants and document their persistence and how well they persist. That's a good reason to go into nature repeatedly. Or some people like this fellow right here are studying birds, and maybe they want to find out how many birds in this nature preserve fit in all the different eating categories: a seed-eating bird, insect-eating bird, a carnivore like a hawk, a scavenger bird, or a frugivore, one that eats fruit, or folivore, one that eats leaves. Maybe that's another reason to go in many times for him. But today I'm going to focus on structural ecology. Structural ecology, what kinds of plants or animals are common and abundant in a system and form the basic structure of the system. It turns out that Mother Nature just about everywhere on Earth had a certain game plan for the structure of ecological systems that maximized their overall biodiversity. And sometimes when humans get involved in these systems, we alter the structure and reduce the diversity. So I'm going to be focusing on that kind of structural insight that we get from repeated visits of nature preserves. Now, in the Western Great Lakes area, we have four main broad categories of terrestrial habitats, and we'll be focusing on these habitats tonight. The prairie is a grassland in the central U.S. that has almost no trees in it. A savanna will have maybe 10 to 50% tree cover, a woodland maybe 50 to 80% tree cover, and a forest nearly 100% tree cover, except where trees have recently fallen down. So we can see Ginsberg-Markham Prairie here, Liverpool Nature Preserve, a savanna there, grading into and a different preserve, an oak woodland in these two pictures, and then finally Ritchie Preserve, which is a true forest. So keep this gradation in mind as we go through this presentation. If we look at this map describing where the central portion of the prairie was, all the black on this map was tall grass prairie. They don't include some of these southern ranges in that map or the northern ranges. But west of that, we had shorter grass prairies. So this is the tall grass prairie, but the white zones form that gradation right around the edge of prairie, savanna, oak woodland to forest. And that's what makes our biodiversity so great. Let's look at Lake County, Indiana, Porter County, and LaPorte County, and we can see that crazy quilt, as I always say, mosaic of habitats. The yellow is prairie, the kind of maroon is savanna, the green is forest, and it's interdigitating a crazy number of different ways. So conservation in our local area by Shirley Hines, Nature Conservancy, Indiana Dunes National Park, and so on, all trying to capture that glorious interplay of systems in our region. Now let's broaden out, since some people might be from further away and not in the Chicago wilderness area. Now let's consider the eastern US and the forest that was there. This map is not perfect, but it's roughly okay for where the original forest was when settlement first happened. And we can see the border between the prairie going to savanna and woodland right there. By 1850, we'd cut out large chunks basically at our latitude and in New England and in the cotton growing states. But after 1850, the railroads expanded, and so we could really do logging on a much bigger scale at this point. And so at some point or another, nearly all of this forest was cut down. The eastern US was never bald of forest because it took 80 years or so to do most of the cutting. So some was growing back as others was being cut. But nearly all of the acreage was cut down. About 400 million acres of forest east of this line originally, and nearly every one of those acres was cut down. The only place where some chunks were left was northern Maine, the Adirondacks, north central Pennsylvania, the western UP, where it meets with Wisconsin, Boundary Waters, and Smoky Mountains. There were small patches throughout, as we'll cover today, that are old growth, but the only sizable ones are in those zones. And it's 1%, 2%, 3% of the original forest is in the old growth category of virgin forest. All right, let's start on this. We're going to go through a whole bunch of different nature preserves and see about how repeat visits give us ecological insights and joys into those preserves. And most of the sites that we're going to look at are in the Chicago wilderness area, which are the established preserves are the dark green areas. So we'll be looking throughout Chicago wilderness area. The Ritchie Preserve, where we'll start, is so small, it's probably not even a dark green dot, but it's right about there. And in the first half of the preserves that we go through, sometimes I'm going to include some scientific data to back up our interpretations so that we're not just stabbing in the dark at some of these interpretations. But the second half, it's just going to be visiting nature preserves. Ritchie Nature Preserve is small, only about 40 acres inside the town of Chesterton. 1 minute away is McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, you name it, all over in that area. And we have homes around 3 sides and railroad tracks on the southern side. And by near miracle, we have almost an old growth woods. It's basically an old growth woods right in there. So we're going to go down this path today, go take the loop that goes to the west and then loop back around. And we're going to take a nature walk and see what we can learn from repeat visits. Of course, in a week or so, we're going to have the spectacular Trillium show, and just the beauty of it is going to be worth the trip. But let's look into some of these ecological insights. One of the first things we see there are a number of majestic red oaks. And red oaks, it turns out, are the most shade tolerant of the oaks. They still need a lot of sunlight, but they need the least amount of sunlight to get into a forest. Also, red oaks grow at very different rates. Sometimes they can grow very fast, sometimes very slow. And in the several of these preserves, we're going to focus on the trees. And if your tree identification you think is a little rusty, I would urge you to check out Michigan Trees by Bert Barnes and Herb Wagner. Great introduction to getting to knowing the trees of northern Indiana or the western Great Lakes area. And then there's also Native Trees of the Midwest, Sally and Harmon Weeks, and then Professor Emeritus at Purdue, George Parker. Those are both great books. There's apps on, on phones for identifying things, but I still like the information you get, the insight you get from books. And in wintertime, when it's cold outside, great to just sit in your comfy chair and look through the books. But we know that red oaks can grow at widely different rates, and these are about 1 meter in diameter almost, so they're rather old growing, but we see no young red oaks anywhere in any of these pictures. So there's not enough light for red oaks to start a new generation if these blow over. As we start down the preserve, we see some maple here, maybe a young beech tree there, a beech tree back there, but we see no red oaks. We carry on down the trail. We see a even older red oak here. The furrows are very deep. Some of the bark is falling off. I'll talk about balding and aging trees in more detail later, but that's an older red oak. But right across from it, there's a tulip tree, and tulip trees grow much faster than all these other trees. So even though these are almost the same diameter, the tulip tree is probably half as old. So around 1900, there was a big opening here, and 4 or more hours of sunlight came down for that tulip tree to get started, but no tulip tree or oak seedlings of any kind anywhere seen. But we carry on down the trail and we notice that there are a lot of oak acorns. So the red oaks had a banner year last year in 2023. This was taken probably around October 2023. Lots of acorns. How often do oaks make acorns? Let's pull some data from a study done in North Carolina at Pisgah National Forest. And the northern red oak is the medium blue depth. And they have these traps. So they're 1 meter square that catch acorns as they fall all over the woods. They can get the estimate on the number of acorns per meter square that fall. And for red oak, let's say 30 acorns per meter squared is a big year. And we have 18 years of data from 2000 to 2017 here. We can see in 2002, red oak had a big year. Then their next big year was 2009. Next big year, 2014. Then they did it 2 straight years, but about 1 out of every 4 years, they have a big production of acorns. Let's consider white oak, the orange ones. They had 1, 2, 3, 4 big years. Also, black oak, they never really did have a big year. This is the light turquoise one here. They had a bunch of small years in there and so on. So oaks have trouble making acorns in big numbers very often, only occasionally. So we continue now. We're approaching the south side of the preserve, and we find our first red oak seedling. So this looks like it was born from the previous mast year or big production. Maybe that was 4 years earlier, like 2019 perhaps. But in that whole 4-year time period, it's just grown 4 leaves and not much above our ankle. It's not getting enough sunlight. I'm not a betting person, but I would say this one is not going to make it unless this tree back here falls down or something. Here's a tulip tree. We finally find a tulip tree. And if you have studied how tulip trees grow, the fact that all the leaf whorls are kind of jammed together, it's struggling mightily. It's getting these little flecks of sunlight, but not much more. So we have a good number of red oaks and tulip trees in the canopy, showing that there was some kind of disturbances in decades past that allowed them to get started. That might have been some select cutting or just storm damage or such, but right now we see almost no of these seedlings. We have big giant beech trees. This one is probably 250 or more years old, and it looks like all sugar maple is recruiting under it. Here are 2 more red oaks, a fast growing one, a slower growing. It's all sugar maple. We still only have 1 seedling of each there. I think I put the same picture in twice. I did that about 3 times, so don't laugh at me too much on that one. Then we hit a large white oak that's, again, about 1 meter in diameter. This tree is older than it looks. The bark looks young, but there's the old bark. The old bark has fallen off. It's balding. So this is older than you would think, even though the bark looks young. Here's an angled beech tree that's probably 300 years old. So that was born into shade. We're going to learn that beech can tolerate shade. So that was born into a shady spot, but there was a gap here that allowed the white oak to get going, but we see no white oak seedlings anywhere in the forest. Then we finally come down near the railroad tracks. We see a belly button height red oak tree. It looks like it has a good leader, meaning one stem going up. That's optimal for fast growth, and it has a few dozen leaves. So we finally find one that might be making it. And if we look up from there, we can see that there is a little bit of a gap there. The branches are closing in, and in about 4 years, that gap is going to be closed. So the game will be, will this tree be able to get high enough up so that it can keep getting sunlight in about the next 4 years? So we got to go by, it's right by the trail, this tree. We got to go by again and again and see if it can recruit into the canopy due to this disturbance. If we get underneath that tree and look up, here's what it looks like. That gap is closing fast. Here's another one. We do find another one. Looks like it's branched. It doesn't have an obvious leader. It doesn't get much sunlight. I wouldn't put $1 on that one making it. Here's another one. So we found a third one, I think it is now. It does seem to have a leader, but beech tree leaves are coming out. They can grow in laterally into the gap, probably going to stop it. And then another seedling, which can't make up its mind which way it's growing. It doesn't stand a chance unless a tree falls down. Here's an old red oak right by the railroad tracks. And here's a sugar maple coming up, just totally shading every acorn that falls. If a blue jay or a squirrel doesn't disperse it, it's not going to make it. Here we have an old beech tree and a few beech trees in this area. So if this beech tree falls, the shade-loving beech saplings are probably going to take its place. So in some places, sugar maple are shade tolerant and they're going to take places, and beech are going to take. But overall in the walk that we're on, we see quite a variety of trees, but it looks like upcoming decades are going to be almost always a beech or a maple recruit. Now, when we say that, we got to say it with an asterisk, because beech trees are now suffering from a disease called beech bark disease. The actual fungal disease is native, but this scale insect, a juvenile here, is not native to our country. It was introduced, and it specializes in being able to suck into beech trees and spread the fungus. So the insect was first found 130 years ago in Newfoundland. It's been slowly moving across. It made central New England in the 1960s, and it finally made it to beech trees around Lake Michigan in the last 20 years. It's probably in Indiana now. So this fungus can cause great disruption to the vascular tissue right under the bark, sometimes reddish, sometimes just peeling the bark off, whereas a beech tree normally looks like this. Hopefully it's not going to be as devastating in our area as emerald ash borer, so we have to qualify all those statements. We're now making the loop back, and we see a bit of an open area where there seems to be a good amount of gaps there, but it turns out those are not natural gaps, because it's part of a damp part in the woods where the water periodically gets to ankle deep. Now, in 2022 and 2023, there probably wasn't enough rain to make much water there. So these tulip tree seedlings all germinated, and they're right next to jewelweed, as many people know, likes a muddy soil. And so for 2 years, they were growing as of last fall pretty slowly in some of these little gaps. But I bet you now, with the rains we've been having, it's ponded and probably killing those tulip trees. Oddly enough, there's a slight dry spot in that damp area, and it looks like a hickory. Unless it's a shellbark hickory, which likes somewhat moist soil, this is probably a dry-loving hickory. And what a miracle of chance this was, that there was an opening on this little mound in an otherwise damp spot, and a hickory nut got deposited by a bird or whatever there 20, 30 years ago, and it looks like it's taking that open space. Another tree that recruits in somewhat shady condition is basswood, and you can see this one's been snaking its way up over the decades there, but basswood doesn't have many seedlings at Ritchie or saplings, 10-foot high ones. So we'll see if it can recruit in the future. It's going to have to pick up its reproduction. Here's how those trees fall down in the wet area, keeping it open. Their roots can't go deep in the soil, so they tend to get uprooted easily. Those tulip trees are probably been drowned out. We can see Carex, I believe it's gray eye, that likes this wet area. So we know it's a wet area. Then we continue in I think it's our last picture for Ritchie Nature Preserve. We see an ancient beech tree that fell down last year. It was snaking its way up here for centuries, and it broke off at this point, creating a big gap, but there was not a single sapling or even seedling that's in the gap. There was no Johnny on the spot tree when this tree fell. If it did, if there was, it got crushed. But as far as those that didn't get crushed, there's nothing there. So we got to go back this year and see if a new seed of something, maybe a red oak from that last year, germinates in there. And maybe that red oak is going to recruit into the gap. All the reasons to keep coming back. Now let's try to quantify some of these forest dynamics. We're going to go to a study done in central Massachusetts. 4 study spots. These are ski slopes that they put in there. And the results of this have implications for Ritchie and other old forests in our area. Let's look, here's red oak, the black bars. Now they were able to age trees back to the 1600s. And in the old Indian spot right up there, all the red oaks, the black parts, recruited before 1820, not a single red oak afterwards. This is kind of like how Ritchie's going. On the other hand, beech trees, this one here, they recruited from 1750 to 1890, but not a one after that. More recently, it's been all maples reproducing, kind of like Ritchie dynamics here. The eastern talus, the red oaks are in the middle, germinating in this case. The black birch, I think it is, throughout the diagonal thing here. And then the maples, again, in more recent times. In southern talus, the maples, 1830 to the recent times. The black birch, kind of in the second half of the time period. The red oaks, all long ago, the black parts of the bar. In the hemlock phase, we know we had from 1750 to 1880, a large number of hemlocks recruit into the canopy. Not a single tree has recruited into the canopy since then for over 100 years. A few red oaks in the old days and one in 1870, and that was it. So one thing we learned from these kinds of studies is that all old woods are not identical in their past history and their present status. So some people try to tell us that we shouldn't let woods go to old growth. We should cut them down because they just turn it into homogeneous woodlands, and that's not true. They have their own distinct histories and present times. Now let's look at releases or decreases. Now, releases when you get a chance to get some more sun and you grow faster up. They can do this from tree rings, which we'll talk about more in a bit. And then the decreases are when you get shaded out after a gap fills. And we can see at all these sites, there are particular periods scattered throughout where trees fall down and trees get releases and they can start to grow up. But then just as soon as they start to grow up, some of them get shaded out again and there's decreases throughout the time frame. So the forest looks static when we walk through it one time, but repeat visits, we're going to see these dynamics. And the more old woods we go to, the more excited we'll get about seeing these dynamics. Go to Western Massachusetts for some hemlock old growth here. A tree fell down a gap there. Let's look at some data from Western Mass. And here's how you look at the tree rings. First year of growth, and then each ring thereafter is a year. Now the white part is spring wood, where the xylem are much wider in diameter because there's more water in the soil. In the summer, the xylem diameter is much less. So we can see that this tree grew very well, and then it started to slow down, had a bit of a decrease. Here's one 1915 born, couple of slow years, but then it increased for a few years, then it decreased. This isn't just wet and dry because they're coming in groups. And then it decreased again, and then it increased from here as the rings widened out. Here, it was increasing through the first half of its life or first half of its trunk, and then it was decreasing the rest of the way. An occasional narrow ring is going to be a dry year. An occasional wide ring is going to be a wet year. They can do this kind of analysis on trees and learn a lot from it. And then here we have 18 sites in Western Massachusetts, and we don't have to go through every one, but we can just look at the color patterns. None of the histograms looks alike. They all look different. They're all old growth sites in Western Massachusetts, and they each have their own history, some going back where they dated trees to the 1500s and 1600s. Each one has its own unique history. And when you go to the recording, if you want to stop it here, you can look at all the different dynamics, but I don't want to get bogged down now on that. Now, most importantly on this one, the same set of 18 sites, let's look at the black bars only. This is where they've been able to tell from the tree rings when a canopy gap formed. So in a decade, so each bar is a decade. So this black bar right here is the decade of 1810, and it looks like 20% of the forest canopy, 20% of the trees up high were knocked down in that decade. But in 1840s or 50s, none. The next year, 2%. In this decade, 1910s, 25%. This decade, 1940s, almost none. So we can see that the disturbance rates, just by training our eyes, they differ a lot from in different sites. Like this one has a lot more disturbance. That one has a lot more disturbance. It might be facing the prevailing storm winds and they blow down more, whereas some of these that have much lower rates of disturbance, maybe they're facing away from the hurricane winds or other winds that come to New England. But one thing we want to take home is that over all of these graphs, about 5% of an old forest canopy is removed per year, per decade. So at Ritchie right now, it's well less than 5% because that wet area doesn't count. That's a natural kind of opening. But as far as the gaps we were able to find, the recent one last year and the other, it's way less than 5%. One might predict that sometime in the next 3 or 4 decades, Ritchie's going to get its turn for a bigger disturbance rate. And we have to, hopefully we'll all still be around, and we'll have to look and see what trees get those gaps. Is it just going to be beech and sugar maple that are Johnny on the spots now, or our basswood, the red oak, occasional white oak, or some others get those spots? And the more old woods we go to, the more we'll get to see this movie in action. On this graph, the only bars that matter for us are beech maple forests and oak hickory forest right here. The blue is old growth, and we can see there's almost no beech maple or oak hickory old growth. The dark green is mature wood. Some of that is old, about to transition to old growth. So I think we have to, as a conservation community and anybody who's preserving forests, such as Shirley Hines, have to look at these older forests and see how we can guide how they naturally would transition to old growth. The other thing here, if we add these blue bars right here, that's about the same height as this bar, which means about half the existing old growth is on public land and half is on private land. So the owners of private land, if they decide they want to give some money to their grandkids' college tuition, they might just cut that whole forest down, and that blue bar could disappear in the next 20 years. And then we look at the map. The blue, again, is old growth. And when we scan through the Gulf Coast states, we see a lot of blue. And we wonder, why is there so much old growth there? And that turns out is mostly in loblolly pine savanna. And once loblolly pine was not logged and allowed to grow back naturally, it grows to mature age in about 80 years. So many of those woods are only 80 years old, but they're effectively old growth. But scanning in our neck of the woods, excuse me, we hardly see any blue in the northern tier. We see a lot of blue out west. A lot of that's being cut down so that we can have cathedral ceilings and the like in our homes. But old growth here, we have to prepare. And we think that Ritchie is basically old growth, but it doesn't show up because it's so small. And then let's get closer to home. Houston woods, they've been studying for over a quarter of a century, and the beech are declining there. Now, the beech bark disease has not hit those woods, so they're declining for other reasons, and the sugar maple is going up over time. And that's verified with this graph, so we won't go through it. But let's look at young trees, medium-aged trees, and old trees, and their annual mortality. The older trees have a much greater annual mortality except in this 2001 to 2005 era. No old trees died in that era. But otherwise than that, we know in woods like Ritchie Woods, some of those older trees are going to start coming down in upcoming decades. Here's a view of Houston Woods, and when you look at it, you think you're walking in Ritchie Woods, except it's a little more hilly there than at Ritchie Woods. But otherwise, just scan the trees. They're all the same. Here's a giant, deeply furrowed tulip tree. That might be even bigger than any, but Ritchie has lots of tulip trees like these two. Otherwise, these woods and the beautiful spring wildflowers in there, almost identical. Houston Woods has had one beech tree come down recently. You know who? Ritchie, one beech tree come down recently. It's always good to visit, make some of your repeat visits in the winter time, because beech trees hold their leaves all winter. So you can tell that beech trees are going to take all those gaps if beech bark disease doesn't get them. But only this one beech tree is here to take any gaps there. And they got other beautiful plants in there as well. Let's go to Warren Woods State Park, just over the state line in Michigan. Go up to exit 6, Union Pier Road. I think it's exit 6. Go over to Warren Woods State Park right here. There's some other old woods nearby. I encourage you to go into a staycation to Southwest Michigan, stay in the historic Lakeside Inn, and hang around for a couple days and visit some of these old woods. But let's go to Warren Woods, where you drive in and park here and pay your fee. This is all disturbed, regrowing woods. So you get to see what 80-year-old woods is like, 100-year-old woods. And then you go across the Galilean River here. This part floods. It's probably flooded right now, so might not be able to get there from there. But anyway, once it dries, you can climb up, and this is the old growth woods. This is known throughout the United States as a classic example of a beech maple forest. This might be pretty good too, but there's no trail over there, so I got to get over there someday to visit that. And what we see in Warren Woods State Park are these mammoth 300-year-old beech trees, and then in this particular picture, all sugar maple saplings in them. So as these trees fall down, and this one will fall down before long, it looks like sugar maple is going to take them over. Here's several beech trees that have fallen down in the last 20 years. It's all sugar maple there. Those are the only two pictures I'm going to show from Warren Woods, but I encourage you to go there and check this out during the season to look at the dynamics. You can replay the history of the site and project the future history of the site, assuming beech bark disease doesn't do too much, just on a simple little walk in the woods. We do have some data here that tells us something about this. These are the understory sugar maple and beech, and the sugar maples under beech, these are the black bars, there's more of those. So there is a tendency for sugar maple to be replacing beech, but for beech trees, they're pretty much everywhere in that site. Something else we learned is that the diameter of sugar maple, when they hit their final release, where they do get to kind of grow up toward somewhat sunny conditions, occurs at about 10 centimeters or 4 inches in diameter. Beech, it doesn't happen till about 20 centimeters or about 8 inches diameter, so maybe about this big. And the average age of a beech tree at 8 inches diameter is 148 years, whereas at 4 inches sugar maple is only 43. They've had 2 periods of suppression that lasted 10 or 67 years in sugar maple and beech respectively. And then just one thing I want to show with this, 2 things real quickly. This beech tree took 300 years to get to 30 centimeters in diameter, or basically a foot. 1 foot in diameter, 300 years old, and it really then made it to the canopy, and it grew much faster in the next 60 years. It doubled its diameter in the next 60 years. All the sugar maple grew faster than the beech, is the second item. And then if it's a single tree fall gap, they increase their growth rates a little bit, but if multiple trees fall down, especially the maple, they increase their growth rate a lot compared to the beech trees. And then in the 25-year period, the quarter century, in this time frame, almost all the gaps were single tree. But from 75 to 94, the next 20 years, almost all the gaps were 2 to 8 trees. So the older trees, as we've mentioned before, are starting to come down, causing this movie to speed up. And they show different rates and sizes of gaps, and that can diversify the forest. That's what those diagrams are showing. If you go further up the highway, but don't take I-94 over to Detroit, but take the split 196 to go toward Grand Rapids. So at exit, I don't remember which one, but not far after the split, you can get off and go to Ross Coastal Plain Marsh Reserve. You can park here. It's a Nature Conservancy site. You walk through regrowing forest. They have some pine plantations they've recently logged so that they'll undergo succession. This trail is really nice. I like that one. Or you can take the Valley Trail. And if you bend up here, go through the shrub char habitat and make this left. Right in here in, I think it was 2020, there was a microburst and about 20 acres of oak, mostly oak trees, were blown down. So now we get to see the really big gap, and we got to go back and back and back to see this as the forest regrows. It looks to me, when I looked right away, there were no Johnny on the spot oaks, no oaks head high or 10 or 15 feet high. It looks like oaks died, but are not going to retake the spot. Now, the problem for future visits is they closed the trail right there, because here's the trail and it's dangerous. Hard to walk around in this area, and a branch might fall on somebody. So for at least a little while longer, it's probably going to be closed. But at some point, they'll open it again, and we got to go see how the forest regrows. In this southern blue trail, it's a classic Midwestern hardwood forest with beech, a stump sprouting beech, red oak, and a whole bunch of other species. Let's go to the western suburbs of Chicago, to Bemis Woods South in Cook County Forest Preserve. Here's the Tri-State Tollway and Ogden Avenue. When you go pick up somebody from O'Hare, you may remember Ogden Avenue. And you come out here and you can park in here. I think I walked through here. I came down here. I went this way by these wetlands, 1 and 2. Came around here to the third wetland and back around. They have a new sign, so they've started the restoration there. If you love walking, you can walk all day in these woods around there. And when we start our walk, we notice, first of all, the woods are fairly open. Here's an unburned patch of the woods, and here's a burned patch from, this is taken about March 1st, so probably a fall burn of 2023. So the woods during the growing season are probably going to look something like this, which is what all indicators woodlands in the Chicago area looked like in 1800. But sadly, in most of our woodlands, they look like this. And what's even just as sad is that so many people think this is the natural scene and it looks great with so much green. But as Doug Tallamy tells us, this is a deadscape. These are all Asian honeysuckles and mostly other non-native species that have shaded out the understory. That's good for wildlife. They're no good for wildlife, so only the trees are good. But we see, once again, there was a mast year of acorns, and in this case, walnuts. So we got to go back and see who starts to recruit, if anybody. We can see there were some areas they haven't gotten to, and they're a shrubby mess. Another part, they burned through the shrubby area, but they're going to stump sprout back. So there has to be some more of that restoration work done. At this point, the wetlands hadn't fully filled, and it looked like they did some shrub removal here. It looks like the natural vegetation around the wetland is herbaceous. So I got to go back soon. I'm betting the wetlands are more full, have lots of frogs and salamanders. Walk up close, you'll hear them plopping in there. So I think those wetlands will be more full. As you walk down the trail, you notice they burned that side, but haven't done any work on this side. You get to that south wetland that's right by Ogden Avenue, and it's filled with hybrid cattails, non-native genetic origin. And we got to come back, and either with teams of players or teams of Western suburbanites, and get in there and somehow help the forest preserve to clear out that non-native mess and get it into a sedge meadow or some other kind of wetland that wildlife uses. We come along the trail and we see that they did some cutting of woody material. We see here some dead trees they cut down, so we can look at the rings again, and we can, first of all, almost all the red oak are 80 years old, but we can look at suppression and releases. I urge you to, anytime you see a cut stump, to try to identify what it is, look at the rings, look for fire scars. We'll talk about that later, and learn as much as you can. But almost all those red oaks are 80 years old. There they had a lot of acorns and hickory nuts made. So we'll see who recruits into the next generation. We notice in this mostly 80-year-old forest, there was one tree that had a bunch of low limbs. So I'm guessing around 1920, they might have been grazing cows here, and this was a shade tree for the cows. And then I know that the Civilian Conservation Corps came in and worked in the 1930s. I'm going to bet they planted those acorns, oak acorns, oak trees at that time that we now know are about 80 plus years old. The fire was uneven in some places. We can see dark zones and light zones, and the vegetation coming back even as early as March in a warm winter. Hackberry trees are common in these woods, and they're the larval host for at least 2 species of butterflies. So we should see those butterflies there this summer. More views of where they cut into the forest. And again, we have the dynamics, red oaks, black cherries, possibly a basswood here, different trees. We're trying to mimic Mother Nature's processes to get the structure of the habitat what it naturally is. Here's that balding idea. So here's a red oak with deeply furrowed bark. So that means it's a much older red oak than its diameter would suggest, which is already pretty impressive. But the outer layers of the bark are starting to fall off. So in 10 or 20 years, this red oak is going to look younger than it is. It's really ancient. You got to look for evidence of balding. Here's a white oak that's balding, and this bark looks really young. In 10 or 20 years, when all that bark's fallen off, somebody's going to say that was a fast growing white oak, but not true. You got to look for signs of balding to know if it's an older tree. So here's a gap created by some giant oak that fell down. We can see there's a gap. We walk to the other side. It's a relatively large gap. And look at this, a whole bunch of Johnny on the spots, or maybe they germinated since it fell. I didn't identify what they are, so got to go back, not only get the exercise and fresh air there, but check out who's going to make it into that gap. And we go by the Salt Creek that's there, and we see sadly that there's a bunch of reed canary grass in there. We got to go back with an army of people who helps to get rid of that reed canary grass and puts normal riparian vegetation there, like cardinal flower and all its vegetation. What a fun project that would be. We could sit at home and hope the White Sox will win a game to entertain us, but I don't know, but let's get out and do that, and then maybe check the radio on the way home. Harmswood, let's go up to northern Cook County. So if you go to Northwestern for a concert or sporting event or something there, you could take a walk through Harms Woods up this way, across the nice bridge, through the woodland, and then back this way. And we see that it's similar to what we've seen at Bemis Woods, except this floodplain habitat looks pretty herbaceous already. And we see a bunch of iris, for example, here. So it looks like there's a decent community already there. But we got to go back in the growing season to see its diversity. There's a little bit of Asian honeysuckles there, but they've taken care of most of it. A balding red oak, older than it looks. We can see they burned through the wood, part of the woods, and we see that even though they burned, we can see a lot of herbaceous vegetation. So that looks like they're making the restoration happen, but we got to go back and check it out. But here there are 3 giant sugar maples, which cast spectacular shade. Doesn't look like there was much herbaceous vegetation there. A tree broke off and started to grow a new leader, excuse me, and there was a Johnny on the spot white oak here. It's been a bit twisting and turning to get up there, but it looks like this thing was ready to take the gap, maybe about this high when the tree fell off, and it's grown up this far. These look like cow shading trees, so we're going to guess that cows were grazing there 100 years ago before being sent to the stockyards. We see a wetland. This is November of last fall, so the wetland has just started to refill. I'll bet that's a full wetland now. It's surrounded by Evanston, another development. How many wet amphibians are still left? We got to go back and check it out. But again, the Des Plaines River is in this area, but good amount of herbaceous vegetation in the floodplain. We're headed in the right direction, getting the structure Mother Nature wants, but we got to go back and learn more about it. Over by the golf course on the west side, it's rimmed with Asian honeysuckles, and here a tree fell down, and I forgot to mentally record, or my decrepit memory, one of the two is operating, who looks like they're getting the gap. Got to go back. Lake County, let's go the furthest north for now that we're going to go. MacArthur Woods, Granger Woods, and Captain Daniel Wright's Woods. They 10 years ago, they made a concerted effort to get it opened up like it was historically, and look at the magical results they're getting. Lots of trails. Go up there and check them out multiple times. Let's come back to home area, go to Meadowbrook Nature Preserve. And We're going to notice the floodplain forest, which is basically really close to old growth forest. The rest of the forest kind of regrowing forest, and then the old fields have been reforested. We'll talk about them. First thing we'll mention is that right in here, you have a lot of marsh marigold like this blooming. So no delay. Get out there this weekend and take Trail 1 and check out the marsh marigold if you haven't already. But we're going to check out this zone of the trail right before the Quinlan Trail starts. We're going to check out the open fields here. We're going to check out this little rivulet, this bend right there, these fields, this woodland. I believe that's our main stops. And first thing we notice up here near where the Quinlan Trail starts is somebody, and it turns out it's Eric Bird, came in and cut down all the non-native black locust trees. So we are hurraying that effort. That's a great job. Black locust is native to the Appalachian and Ozark chain, but they planted it in millions of other counties around there, and it kind of overwhelms systems. They're not naturally here. So we got to go back and see how well that worked in getting rid of the black locust and what seeds are in the seed bank, herbaceous or woody, that come in to take it back. Here's the trail, so it's right there. But if we look out in the field here, surrounding the Paul Quinlan Trail, we can see the tens of thousands of trees that they planted out there. We can see where oaks are recruiting in because they're marcescent, they hold their leaves. So go out in nature in the wintertime and check out all these dynamics in there. We get up to the little rivulet because the water table's so close, trees blow over easily, a bunch of small trees fighting to take this gap. Let's go check that one out. You get up to that bend that's up over here, and all of the understory trees that are basically calf or thigh thickness are sugar maples. So that looks like it's going to become in the future visits a sugar maple forest. Part of that field up on the north side is wetter than others, so you don't see so much oak there. But if you go 2 feet higher, we don't need mountains here, just 2 feet. And the plant community is recruiting in oaks from the planting. We come to a corner up there up on the north central area. We see 3 old trees, one dead one, that have wide-ranging branches. These were probably cow shading trees 80 years ago. And then we see a regrowing forest that's coming back. It's at the exclusion stage where a lot of small trees are dying due to the competition. So this is early successional forest at Meadowbrook, but here's a beech tree, which is late successional, trying to speed up and join the young whippersnappers there. Interesting to see if it stays in the system. Then we come to the old growth area that I think is really pretty much old growth right along the creek. We can see basswood that got in there, even an occasional sassafras, which like sunlight got there. A lot of giant white oaks, red oaks of impressive diameters, even a black oak, which you would never think would be in a floodplain, but some kind of amazing combination of events about 80 years ago got that black oak in there, and the beech and another old white oak and lots of sugar maple. So a wide variety of trees, but we can look at it to see the dynamics and enjoy things like the parasitic beech drop trees. No chlorophyll in that plant. It's a parasite on the roots of ultimately on the roots of beech trees. But again, we look for trees that have fallen down and try to figure out who these possible winners are going to be. Let's go to Ambler Flatwoods as we're moving along here at a pretty good pace now. And that's up by Michigan City. And here's the basic map to it. Regrowing forest down here, kind of a buffer forest. And then you take the main trail. It's a young forest here, a somewhat logged forest. There are deep ruts from the logging, but you get to about here on, it's basically old growth with minimal harvesting of trees. Because it's a flat woods, just small depressions collect water, and they all look the same when you go in the winter time as far as how deep they are, their orientation, all that. But each wetland is different in its depth and its hydrology and its orientation for the sun. We don't even have to name the plants, but we can see in each of these 5 wetlands, it's a different plant community in each one. And you can make the list if you have that botanical expertise, but your eyes can pick out the variation and you can rejoice ecologically in the diversity of those plants. And then we see in some of the drier areas, again, we have, just like in other woodlands, we have white oak, which needs light next to a sugar maple, a young sugar maple probably, an ancient, I don't even know if this beech tree is still alive. Got to check that out. Got to go back and visit it. It's almost gone. It's not beech bark disease. It's just even older than me. But, and we know there's a beech there and a beech back there. So this is a shady area historically, but a tree must have fallen down to the right over here, because here's a black cherry that needs gaps in the tree. So that's about a 60 to 80-year-old black cherry tree. So sometime around 1940 to 1960, there was enough sunlight for that to get going. Or this tulip tree, the same thing. So we can look at the old red oaks and white oak and a beech tree and a tulip tree, and we can just marvel that these species are all in close proximity in an old forest. It's not an old degenerate, low diversity forest, but do we have it set up so that Mother Nature can work her magic to maintain it? It almost looks like another hickory tree got going in this wet area when a tree fell down. There's another repeat here. But again, oaks need a mast year followed by enough sunlight, maybe caused by fire, which is probably not common at Ambler because it's so damp, to get to that 10 to 15 sapling, 10 to foot 15 sapling or pole size. Maples and beech don't need that. They can always recruit into shade. But a lot of the trees in the wetter areas fall over at younger ages because the soil's so wet, the roots can't grow deep into waterlogged soil. So this one, not that old, blew over. Here's one that maybe blew over 5 years earlier, and it looks like a hickory tree right there. Not many hickories at Ambler, but that's how it gets its spot. A hickory tree, if that thing can survive, can live for 250 years. So our great grandchildren might see a hickory growing there, and if they could envision that this is how it got started. And then a little bit, another one, and a little bit older one, it looks like the gap might have closed on this one. Nobody took that gap, closed above. And here's the famous one right on the trail where they have the sign showing about 2009, 2010, when the tree fell down. That was its root mass coming up. It's the roots have decayed and the soils come down. The tree fell that way. So we get a pit, a mound, and the dead tree. The tree will be gone at some point, and it'll just be a mound and a pit. Or if you're in New England, a pillow and a cradle. But here's one, and it takes about 100 to 150 years for the land to level out after you form a pit and a mound. So this one is pretty level. There's the pit, there's the mound, the tree fell to the right. I'm guessing about 1924, 100 years ago, and it created enough light, a bird defecated a black cherry seed right there, and it germinated up, and it's about 100 years old now. This kind of diversity happens if Mother Nature's structural processes are operating. Let's go to the Glenwood Dunes in the Indiana Dunes National Park. You park, there's ample parking right here and a gazillion trails to go through all different kinds of habitats there. We went with Pam and Eric a couple of years ago, and we saw that many of the oak trees were defoliated, and John Kay told me that was probably the silky moth, earlier known as the gypsy moth. And so we know that the woods were letting in a lot more sunlight. If they didn't have many fires recently, woody plants got most of the action there in here. But it'd be good to go back and see how many of the trees rebounded from the defoliation by the caterpillars and what kind of vegetation is underneath it. And of course, we can always go enjoy this. I think it's the soapwort gentian that are there. Real quick, go down to southern Indiana to White Oak Nature Preserve. DNR talks about all these oaks that are there, but look at the marcescent beeches throughout all of these pictures. And it looks like it's heading toward a beech forest unless beech bark disease knocks it out. If we go back up to Lakeside, Michigan, the Chicago Prairie League has a preserve, again, like Ritchie, with some old giant red oaks. Some of them are falling. It looks like a sugar maple is snaking its way up to get that gap. Let's move into savannas very quickly, and even more quickly, I hope, into prairies. And so at the Nature Conservancy, they have their 8,000 acre Kankakee Sands, 10,000 acres Willow Slough Fish and Wildlife Area, 3,000 over in Illinois here, and then the Conrads up here, another few hundred. And if you want to see different age prairie restorations here, you can park at this spot. Walk out here. This is about a 27-year-old prairie restoration. This is about a 10-year-old, and that's about a 6-year-old. So in a short little venture, you can see how well they're doing. But if you get out into the savanna in the healthy times, you get that open mix of trees and sun. things like this elegant stinkhorn fungus, they can come up in a lot of places, but so it makes this foul smelling goo on it, which is really the spores. So flies who think it's a dead animal come to investigate it. They find out they've been tricked. They get spores all over their feet and fly somewhere else. That disperses them. Lots of flowers and butterflies, stuff. But they have a little bit of prairie up on the north side. And if your herbaceous plants are a little bit, knowing them are a little bit off kilter, then you can, this is the golden age. For decades, we've had the Peterson Field Guide. That's the best one, and Newcomb, to starting out in your identification of wildflowers. Once you conquer them with that, then Nathaniel's and Scott's book on wildflowers of Indiana Dunes, and Scott's and Mike Amoya's book on wildflowers of the Midwest, and then all the wildflowers, not selections, but all of them, K. Yaskovich, Indiana. Get all those, again, apps will get you something, but there's something more intellectually stimulating to get from a book. And we can see the nice prairie pictures. They have the dead man's fingers fungus coming up now. Sometimes they can kind of contribute to a weakened tree's final death, but this fungus is the most, looks like it's from a Netflix series or somebody buried in the woods and their fingers were coming out when they died. But we can see that there was a period of extensive sprouting of acorns, too many woodies in many parts. We can see that fire top killed these oaks 40 or 50 years ago, and they came up as stump sprouts. So that does happen, but the stump sprouting has gone crazy due to a weird sequence of events that happened. That's nobody's fault. It just happened. But we can see they're starting to open up. Here's that gradation from Conrad Station savanna to the 27-year-old prairie. Here's the Conrad Station to the 27, to the 10-year-old, and the 6 back there. So much to learn in such a small area. But we can see that they're trying to get it back opened up. But what can we learn about fire from this? We know that if you burn, it top kills many of these sprouts and they just start up again, but they're working on that. But they did a chainsaw class not too long ago, and we can see there was a fire scar here, and then it burned again after the healing. Here's one where the original tree burned right about here. Here's where the tree perimeter was when the fire came from the bottom, and it burned the bark and burned into the wood. And then you can see the xylem hooking around here. And so all you see is this little slit outside, but there's a fire scar inside. Now this one, the burn damage was a little bit greater. There it burned back, and so the fire scar has been coming in over the last 10 or 12 years. So we know about 10 or 12 years ago, they had a fire that was rather severe in terms of its heat, but the trees recovered and have a lot of wood. They're still pretty strong. Now here's one they cut for the chainsaw class a little bit further up. So the scar is way down here. This looks like an older scar. And so if we go straight up here, that little black spot there is this thing. So this wasn't a fire scar because there's no hooking of the xylem. It probably just was some tissue that died because it was killed down here. We can look at these things and we can see the releases and suppression. We can see the fire scar is minor right there. On that one, we can see the fire scar again was pretty major, and it hooked in so that now there's just this seam. If they didn't cut this tree down, you'd see this seam and you wouldn't know what it was, but it leads into a fire scar. Here's one with 3, 1, 2, 3 stems and some rotting after the fire. So sometimes the tree starts to rot after a fire, and then several trees, the fire wasn't hot where they are, and you can do your aging and everything. But we see from some of these fires don't leave any scars. Some fires leave a bit deeper scar, like this one here. Sometimes a tree catches on fire in the middle. And so that you can read all this. Again, just stop and look at trees. Here's the fire scar. It healed over pretty fast, but it rotted in between. But the tree still has a lot of wood. It's doing great. Waterfall Glen, one picture on this one. This is 2,500 acres in DuPage County around Argonne National Lab here. 10-mile trail. If you just want to get out and walk, you don't have to go to northern Wisconsin. You can just walk here. But lots of the trail are filled with Asian honeysuckles. Some parts have been cleared out. Some parts are prairie. But Stan Tech and our former student Patrick worked on this area. Here's the outline of it. They had a contract. It looked like this, full of Asian honeysuckles. He went through and chewed it all up. And we're going to go back to Waterfall Glen repeatedly upcoming years to see how it recovers. And I believe they do some seeding there as well. Teff Savannah, an hour southeast of Gary, Indiana, 8,000 acres of basically savanna and wetlands, but some parts are higher quality, these blue boxes here. And the Nature Conservancy, they've even bought more up here, Prairie Border. It's a spectacular series, but in Teff Savannah, they had that sprout problem come too. So Matt had a contract out for 150 acres. We can see some old burn scars here, 150 acres to clear out the weird event of too much sprouting. We got to go back to Teff this summer and check it out. Let's get into prairies then, our final stab as we get at an hour here. So I'll do it quickly. Of course, we know prairies have a lot of tall grasses and many, many forbs. Crestmore Prairie is completely surrounded by Hobart. This used to be a golf course. Now it's becoming home. So another miracle that this was saved. And you can walk through kind of a succession area to a wet prairie to the high quality prairie. And we know that Doug and Allison and their team burned parts of that this year that were getting too much woody intrusion. You can see the woodies coming in here. The fire wasn't super hot, but probably enough to top kill these woodies. So we got to go back there and check out how well it happens. Sometimes their fires are a little hotter. So here's Allison in charge of a hotter fire from a couple of years ago. So COVID kind of slowed down the burning in many nature organizations, but now we're trying to pick up the pace and get back to what Mother Nature decided. And we're hoping that instead of the woody intrusion, we get scenes like these pictures from past years at Crestmore Prairie and the stunning biology that's there. Want to focus, as we're truly winding down here, a little bit on restoration of prairies, and in particular prairie drop seed. So let's go to Kankakee Sands. There's the Conrad station, and we go to Unit J, which Elisa calls Unit J. I like to call it the silo unit because it has a silo in it still. And we see that prairie drop seed, it's part of the tall grass community, but it's a shorter one and it's a beautiful grass. But it looks like nobody wants to grow around it. So let's remember that a tall grass prairie, 100 acres of high quality tall grass prairie, might have 20 to 30 species of grass or grass-like plants and about 300 forbs, which are non-grass flowering plants. So the great diversity is forbs, but the biomass is mostly grasses. But we can see this prairie drop seed seems to be keeping all the forbs at bay. The only forbs growing near it are rattlesnake master. Here's another one with its seed heads coming up. Nothing, maybe a downy sunflower and a rattlesnake master in there, but not much growing with it. So this is a pattern we notice on our first visit. Not much around this prairie drop seed, a white false indigo there, some more rattlesnake master, a white false indigo, rattlesnake master and white false indigo near the prairie drop seed. These are the kind of things we can imagine, but we don't see much prairie drop seed, and the obedient plant comes in and the bottled gentian comes in. But where we have the prairie drop seed, it looks like rattlesnake master, occasional weedy goldenrod. So we can see these patterns and go back over time. Here's a shorter grass from our campus preserve, side oats grama, and it looks like it's allowed purple prairie clover in there. It looks like rosinweed and compass plant, but not much else. I don't think it's as competitive as prairie drop seed, but we can observe and go back and check these kind of things. And then as we're really winding down, my three favorite connected preserves, maybe on planet Earth, are Somme Prairie to the west, where you park at the post office lot here and go visit it. In the middle, Somme Prairie Grove, the best of the three. And then Somme Woods over here, which you can park here, walk carefully across Waukegan Boulevard or something like that, and get over to Somme Prairie Grove. And so in Somme Prairie, just spectacular prairie pictures here. Somme Prairie Grove, I stole this one from Mike McDonald. It's too beautiful to pass up. And then another one from Somme Prairie Grove. And then the woodland part of Somme Prairie Grove, which are these green areas. Just a spectacular mosaic of processes, but we see the same thing where prairie drop seed dominates. Just train your eyes across here. Here we once again have rattlesnake master in there, maybe one little blazing star in there suffering a little bit, but we see now that lead plant can encroach a bit into the prairie drop seed. So we just try to observe nothing in this one here. And then we notice that round-headed bush clover seems to come in, a little bit of prairie dock, but not a lot with the prairie drop seed. But we go to areas where prairie drop seed not so abundant, and we see blazing prairies, savanna prairie blazing star. And there we start to see different things, obedient plant and lots of other purple prairie clover wherever the prairie drop seed is not. And then lots of lead plant and that, and a prairie dock right in front. And I didn't put a picture in because I don't have it, but we all got to go to Griner Nature Preserve in Lake County, Shirley Hines site. They have some prairie drop seed there. Let's make those observations. We took my old college roommates, the Daubers, there, and they're noticing that not much grows with the prairie drop seed. Besides its pure beauty, this grass, it looks like rattlesnake master can hang in, but where you don't have the prairie drop seed, it looks like a riot of forbs. Is this a general rule, or is it just something that happened in a few preserves? And while you're there, they got the bottle gentians, the prairie gentians, the stiff gentians, lots of gentians, cream gentian, if you want to go look, and you'd see the beautiful transition from prairie to grove. And you go over to the Somme Woods on the right side, and you almost always meet some volunteers there. And they're out collecting seeds and even spreading some of them to restore the woodlands. I've only been to Somme twice, and I've seen volunteers each time. Churchill Prairie in the DuPage County, just this part is a state nature preserve. Lots of prairie drop seed. It's kind of a November, December time period, or maybe early November, but don't see a lot of forbs. Got to go back there in the summertime. But all this analytical stuff I've been doing does not diminish the fact that nature preserves are just beautiful. And I close with some slides from Miller Woods Savannah, part of Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore in Gary. You can come up, take the walk through the boardwalk, the spur down here to Lake Michigan, hang out at the lake and come back. Just stunning beauty. I took another picture from Mike McDonald here. But you still get to see things they've done. This wetland was infested with Phragmites, and the national park got on it. They took it out. So you still get that analytical part among the great beauty. And then you go by Liverpool Nature Preserve, which is just north of Hobart, Indiana. The nature preserve is this rectangle, and it's completely developed around it. And then it has electrical and pipeline right-of-ways, totally abused land. A near miracle that this 40 acres is preserved. Beautiful black oak savanna grading to colic root in Mesic Prairie. And they recently found down in the wetter zone some non-flowering Queen of the Prairie there, but I substituted in a picture from nearby of what Queen of the Prairie will look like down there. I just hope these people know what they have there. Let's look at this orange roof. There it is. So there they live right next to this world-class nature preserve. So many rare and endangered species. It's a miracle that Derek has kept it in such great shape. And I close with a site from further away in Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore. There's so many trails that your staycation would have to last a week or more if you're going to visit them all. But I picked the Platte Plains Trail, which actually has an extension that goes up here. So you can start off the screen. I came down this trail through here, down this way, around there, this way up near the wetlands, up the railroad grade. You could go out to the lake there if you want, but I went through this jack pine habitat here. You could have gone here to the beach. I kept going straight through here, and I finally went down that way and come back here. The only troublesome spot, this trail is not as easy, this turn, as it looks. It's not as very well marked, accurately marked. But either way, you're going to end up back. You end up back at your car there after 6 hours of walking. But let's take a look at this. You get this mixed northern hardwood forest where white pine is starting to recruit back into the forest. We know we logged nearly all the white pine from the northern forest, and we can see little vestiges of what it was like in 1600 or 1500 when trees recruited, grew to 300 years old, and we cut them down. Just beautiful to see that happening. And then we get to the jack pine part, and in some places it's very sterile-like. In other places it's a little bit more robust vegetationally. But if you go on a day after a cold front has come through and that brilliant blue sky of northern Michigan is there, you'd just be almost into tears. And here's that branch going to the beach. Now, we've all gone to the beach a million times, and we're almost used to it so much. But when I came over that little knoll at the top of the trail there, and saw this, I thought I was in the most beautiful place on earth. But that's where I wanted to end. And thanks for coming along on all these trips with me. And if anybody has any questions, be sure to ask.